So, my pranam to all of you, and I'm very happy to be back, if you will, joining all of you in this weekly series of meetings that we have had during the last months with the English-speaking community. So today we are starting a new series of lectures. It will be a brief one during this month of Kartik, and we will be meeting each other every Monday in this case. And we will be speaking about something in connection to what's going on now in this month and what has been going on the last months for those who have been part of our last series of lectures on the Raghavarma Chandrika. So, as you may know, we have been studying this important work of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, which refers to the moon rays which shed light on the path of rag. And I thought it would be interesting to connect some of the points that he mentioned there, such as his description of Krishna-lila and Krishna in Krishna-lila as both Mugdata and Sarvajñata, experiencing on one side being overwhelmed on one side, divine overwhelmed, and on the other side experiencing majesty, show and exhibiting majesty and omniscience and qualities, absolute-like qualities. And this interesting tension between the two living together in harmony in Braj. So that for me was a really highlight of our studying of Raghavarma Chandrika. Now we are in the Kartik month. So Kartik month implies many things, as you may imagine. But one of those is the focus on Damodara-lila. The focus on Damodara-lila specifically, just show the Damodara-lila, because we may also speak about some Radha Damodara-lila, some tying of the clothes, some secret marriage between Krishna and the gopis, if you will, in the context of their parakiya. But now I'm speaking by Damodara-lila, Krishna being tied to the mortar by Jashoda Mai and so on. So I consider it's very interesting. This Damodara-lila is highlighting many important points, and that's why our series here have been called Divine, Imperfect, like trying to harmonize or accommodate these two apparently opposite ideas. Now on one side, a flawed absolute, the one we worship, so-called imperfect absolute, and on the other side, divinely, transcendental, achintya, and so on. So how to walk this tightrope between perfection and so-called imperfection, at least, that appears to seem ordinary in this Braja-lila. How to deal that not only in our prospect to a Braja-lila and how we understand Braja-lila itself, but how do we deal ourselves in our life as sadhakas with these ideas, perfection, imperfection, the ideal to attain our present, maybe limited condition, most probably. So how to integrate all these values in such a way that may eventually create some bond with what we find ultimately in the Krishna Lila, and how this Damodar Lila especially is showing that. So that's why we gave this name to the series, Divine Imperfect and the Damodar Lila and its theological implications. So with any Lila, especially Krishna Lila and Braj, each one of these Lilas is having some multi-dimensional simultaneous purposes going on, one after the other. And Damodar Lila is really overwhelming in that sense. So many teachings, so many points we can make, philosophically speaking, theologically speaking, one after the other. And it's just one brief chapter in the Bhagavad, 9th chapter of the 10th canto, but so many things are there. So we will try to plumb the depths of such a section, at least as much as our time and insight allow us, as Krishna's mercy allow us to engage in Harikatha. So today we will start with this new series of studies, trying again to connect with our previous one, trying to connect with what's going on in this Kartik month, Damodar Lila, and hopefully all of us as sadhakas, as practitioners in Gaudiya Vedanta, extracting some benefit in our present stage, wherever we may be. So I will share some ideas, and of course at the end we will share some space if you may have any questions regarding what we have been sharing today. So again, as I told you to begin with, I think we should establish this important point. We are worshiping the Absolute, or we want to worship, and eventually, of course, as we know in our tradition, we want to end up loving Krishna, which is a little bit different, at least semantically, than worshiping the Absolute. Even though that will be the topmost type of worship of the Absolute, but it doesn't seem like worship, and the Absolute doesn't seem like the Absolute any longer. But he becomes more than God, as we always say. No? Krishna in Vrindavan is God beyond God. God is an aspect of Krishna, and not vice versa. So as Gaudiyas, we should get accustomed of dealing with this type of expressions and concepts, and knowing how to properly accommodate them, not in a sentimental way, but in a properly Siddhantic way. So the Absolute, one of the many definitions of the Absolute, because Damodara-lila has to do a lot with this, as we will see. It seems very limited, very ordinary, but in the midst of that, so much majesty is happening. So the Absolute is there, no doubt. So the very definition of someone being the absolute being, absolute personality, means that that personality has to have absolute attributes, absolute capacities, and one of them being the Absolute has to be capable and give himself the opportunity of like hosting different contradictions within himself and dealing with them somehow or other. For the Absolute to be absolute means every possibility has to be there, but in its perfect, most perfect expression. So that to begin with, to have a preliminary approach to what this Damodara-lila is about. We are approaching the Absolute. We will be addressing the Absolute in childlike presentation, in a very particular way, crying, stealing, lying, being tied. It doesn't seem the Absolute, but still it's the Absolute. And himself is, again, allowing himself to include different types of contradictions, and all of them being properly harmonized here in Braj. So that's the Absolute that we worshipped. It's an Absolute that seems to be imperfect. It seems to be not so absolute. That seems to be relative, limited. But because of that presentation, and because he's still the Absolute, he becomes so charming. That's the point Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes in his Raghavarma Chandrika. He's saying any baby is charming on some level, but what does it make Krishna as a baby, for example, in this Damodara-lila, so charming? Well, the special charm there is that he's the Absolute at the same time. Any other baby from this world is not the Absolute. Some charm may be there, but if the Absolute is appearing himself as a baby because he feels totally obliged and controlled to reciprocate mercifully with the particular prem, in this case of Yashoda, that's especially charming. So, but it seems, again, in the external presentation, it seems that this Absolute is flawed. And we worship a flawed Absolute, if you will. Once Srila Siddhar Maharaj mentioned that very nicely. He says when Krishna, especially when we say Krishna here, we say our Krishna, Braja Krishna, not Dwarka Krishna, Mathura Krishna, or whatever. So this Krishna hides himself behind a tangle, I think that's a word in English, a tangle of imperfections, so-called imperfections again. So that's a filter to test how essence seeker we want to be, and where do we get stuck, and where do we put our special focus, and so on. How much we are attentive to grasping, to taking only the milk from the mixture of milk and water, if you will. So again, we are worshipping this particular unique phase of the Absolute that for us Gaudiyas represents the ultimate expression of the Absolute, and we have very good reasoning in order to trying to explain why. And this is mainly depicted in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as you know. This Braja Lila Katha is given to us mainly in the Bhagavad, as Guru Maharaj may say. In other scriptures, such as Vishnu Purana and some others, we find many details, if you will, names and whatever, numbers and technical information about the Krishna Lila in Braj even, that may not be present in the Bhagavad. But in the Bhagavad, we find the main delivery. What's delivered there? The bhava, the mood. That's the most important thing. That's the most powerful thing in order to create new bhakti samskaras, rasa samskaras in us as sadhakas. So this Bhagavad, of course, everything is building up to the 10th canto, as you know, to the Braja-lila, and after that, everything is reflecting back on this Braja-lila. And as Guru Maharaj always points, this 10th canto of the Bhagavad, which is the smiling face of the Absolute between all the volumes, has three main centers. The Vatsalya Rasa Center, Sakya Rasa Center, Madhurya Rasa Center. And we could say in all this, we find different ordinary, so-called ordinary expressions of the Absolute. Imperfect, flawed, pick the name you want. But again, all this will increase the experience of Chamatkar. So I will connect this very interestingly to this idea. Because again, all this is a doctrine of rasa. We follow a doctrine of rasa. Srila Rupa Goswami presented his doctrine of rasa based on the rasa theory of Bharat Muni, but presenting that in the context of bhakti rasa and analyzing the whole Krishna Lila as a drama in which all these aesthetic ingredients are presenting themselves and interacting properly. And what's the essence of rasa? All these aestheticians have said, rasa sar chamatkar. Chamatkar. Chamatkar means like wonder. No? For rasa to be there, an experience of wonder has to be there. In India, they have this saying which says, namaskar chamatkar e namaskar. So that which invokes chamatkar, which invokes wonder, e namaskar, is worthy of namaskar, is worthy of our respect, of our attention, if you will. So all these so-called ordinary centers of the Bhagavad, Krishna is a baby, Krishna is a boy playing with friends, Krishna is a lover, and he seeming himself vulnerable, and so many other so-called flaws and frailties. All this in the proper context, understanding the background of Aishvarya, and how the Absolute still is the Absolute, but expressing himself in this unique way because of the love that is on the other side. All this will create an ever-increasing experience of chamatkar if properly understood. So externally it may seem imperfect, but internally the bhavukas, the rasikas will be tasting higher and higher levels of chamatkar, of wonder, of rasa. So we find this in these three centers, Vatsalya rasa, which is mainly connected to the Damodara-lila, God being chastised, God being afraid because of the chastisement of Yashodas. We will see God being tied. You can try to conceive the unlimited being tied. Chamatkar. Try to taste chamatkar. Then we have Sakya Rasa Center, Brahma Vimohan Lila, God in full picnic with his friends, having picnic lunch. Again, that's quite overwhelming, if you will. Brahma, his four heads, as you know, were spinning here and there with full lack of formality. So increasing chamatkar and eventually Rasa Lila. God as a playboy, God as a womanizer, if you will, woman hunter. So properly understood, all this serves to increase the experience of rasa, to add to the spice to the masala of chamatkar. We can call that this chamatkar masala. The Bhagavatam is very expert in giving these recipes, ecstatic recipes of increasing chamatkar masala. So properly understood, all this will add to our charm, to our attraction towards the charm of Krishna Lila. So in this series, we will try to focus specifically on the Damodara-lila, which is kind of the beginning of this unfolding of chamatkar, unfolding of the rasa experience that Krishna is tasting along with his devotees in Braj. Remember, all this different presentation of the Absolute in Braj has to do with a particular type of love on the other side. If you see God like tied, if you see God crying, if you see God, in this case Krishna and Braj, in picnic lunch, or crying for Radha's love, on one side we are seeing Krishna. Don't forget the second part of the equation, not only Vishaya Lambana, Ashraya Lambana, the vessel of love. So if you see the object of love being afflicted or affected in such a way to the point that he appears vulnerable, limited, frail, whatever, you have to ask yourself, but which type of emotion is impacting on him to make him take that form? Krishna is being carved in Vrindavan by the love of the Brajavasis, to put it in a poetic way. Krishna is a byproduct of the Brajavasis prem. That's a very important point to understand. So whichever is that prem on the other side, Jashoda's prem, Radha's prem, Madhumangala's prem, whatever, that creates immediately a particular type of impact in Krishna and makes him take a particular form, disposition, psychology, and form of way of reciprocating to that, because Vrindavan Krishna only exists. Basically, his only business is to reciprocate the loving dealings with his devotees. To taste rasa means that. And Krishna has nothing to do. He's only living for tasting rasa perpetually. And that means in order to reciprocate to the Brajavasis love, which is nishkam, totally free from all selfish desire, even this desire for mukti, all the highest level of selflessness is there. So there is a very strong desire they have only in a very intense, concentrated way to please Krishna, and Krishna cannot but reciprocate that and live only for that. He has no time for something else. So that love is so intense, and this Damodara-lila starts to unfold the glory of Vrindavan, to sing the glories of the Brajavasis love, in this case, by way of pointing to first Jashoda's prem, and the power of that to create this prema raju, or rope of love. So this Damodara-lila, let's share some words on the Damodara-lila, is really connected to a lot of these elements of, again, frailty, vulnerability, but as we already mentioned in some lectures before, vulnerability and empowerment. Real empowerment is in the realm of proper vulnerability. And how to connect all this with what Guru Maharaj will call divine humanism. So in this Damodara-lila, we find all this in the narrative of the Damodara-lila, how the Bhagavatam, how Sukadev very nicely is depicting this to Maharaj Parikshit by immersing the king fully into the chamatkar of Krishna being, again, crying and tied and so on, but suddenly reminding him or reminding us, he who is the unlimited, who has no beginning, no end, no interior, nor exterior, who is a Chinta, who is worshipped by the Devas, now is being tied to a mortar by her mother, and so on, his mother, and so on. So in this Damodara-lila, we find this interesting unfolding of so-called imperfection in the different stages, with the focus on Vatsalya here again, different levels of mundanality, so-called mundanality. Krishna being breastfed, no? Drinking the milk from Jasoda's breast. No? Krishna not being very happy when Jasoda is putting him on one side to take care of the milk. Krishna breaking the pots, no? Naughtiness, sharing that with the monkeys. And so Krishna being scared because Jasoda is running after him with a little stick. Krishna being tied. Try to understand all these levels of so-called distortion from what is expected from God, if you will. So before, I will share in a little bit more detail the narrative of the Damodara-lila, but before we go to the Damodara-lila per se, 9th chapter of this 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, interestingly, in the 8th chapter of the 10th canto, we find another chapter that is going around Vatsalya, which is when Krishna is showing all this multiverse to Jashoda in his mouth, as you know. Krishna is being accused by his friends to Yashoda. He was eating dirt. So Krishna is saying to Yashoda, I was not eating dirt, but Balaram was there. Balaram is the Maryad Purush in Krishna's life, and he was saying, yes, he was eating dirt. Krishna is saying, now they are jealous of me because I was defeating them in fighting, so they want me to be defeated somehow or other. They could not defeat me, so they want to defeat me by accusing me of something I didn't do. But actually, Krishna was lying actually at that moment. He did eat dirt. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that. But actually, since Krishna, the lying of Krishna was increasing the Vatsalya Prem exchange with Jashoda. That lying is nourishing Vatsalya Rasa, it's nourishing Rasa. So that lie represents the topmost truth because it's nourishing Rasa. So again, we have to understand all the function of all these so-called faults, the lying and the frailty and the scare and the fear, nourishing Rasa. So we will begin today by trying to analyze what's going on there in the Nitya Lila, and gradually, of course, we will connect that with our particular experience here in the Shrishti Lila and trying to get closer to the other Lilas. So, in this 8th chapter, again, interestingly, Krishna showing Jashoda the whole universe in his mouth. Some commentators say that Jashoda saw the universe in Krishna's belly. So that's an interesting connection because that belly was holding all the universes. The next chapter, she was trying to tie Krishna around his belly. So again, try to appreciate how the narrative is playing with the tension of Aishwarya and Madhurya over and over again. So to begin with, this 8th chapter again shows us God as a son, which to begin with is a very particular idea to what we are accustomed to. Generally, we are children, God is our father, and since he's our dad, we are here to ask him things. Dad, I want this, I want that, give me this, give me that. So Vatsalya Rasa, in this case, inverted, if you will, Vatsalya Rasa implies totally the opposite. Poshana, nourishing, maintaining God, and so on. So this Damodara-lila, as we will go like in crescendo with different types of proposals, more and more so-called imperfect. Again, God being a son, not the Supreme Father. He has father, he has mother, he's maintained by his parents. The all peaceful God, generally known as Vishnu Narayan. He's calm, he's quiet, Shanti. But here, being naughty, being a thief, God being scared. Bhagavatam says, Yad viveti sayam bayam. The fear is fearing God. But here, that was what overwhelmed Kunti. Here, Krishna is afraid. Remember, this is what Nanda Maharaj said as an argument during the Govardhan Lila when someone said to him, maybe your son is God. He was lifting this hill for a week with one finger. He's only 5 years old. And he said, no, he cannot be God. I know God. He's calm, he's peaceful, he's not lying, he's not stealing. And Krishna is doing exactly all the opposite. So he cannot be God for sure. I have full conviction, full daily practice insight of that, experience of that. And at the end, again, all these Damodara-lilas converging after all these different layers of so-called imperfection. God, son, maintained, crying, afraid, lying, stealing, eating dirt, and everything else is converging in this very powerful symbol of God being tied with a rope. Try to imagine to a martyr, tie with a rope. The absolute, the one who cannot be immeasurable, being tied. Of course, we have to go beyond the literal meaning of this, try to take shelter in the interpretative meaning, and of course the esoteric reading of this to understand what's the real background of this Damodara-lila, and what are the teachings and implications, again, theological implications of that. And on the other side also we have the so-called imperfection of Jashoda herself. Jashoda, so-called, again, imperfection, not realizing, for example, first of all, now seeing Krishna's mouth, as we will see, totally overwhelmed, but later she's not realizing every time it's 2 fingers short, the rope, and bringing more rope without realizing the Aishwarya of Krishna, divine ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. And she was experiencing imperfection in trying to bind bind to say, yeah, to tie Krishna, but she continued with her endeavor. She increased her obsession in order to perform anukul seva, favorable service. She was not discouraged. On the contrary, she became more and more, not stubborn in an egoic way, but obsessed in a favorable way to render favorable service to Krishna, anukul seva. So in this eighth, going back for a minute to this eighth chapter before the Damodara-lila, we have Krishna eating the earth. So the friends are accusing him. Krishna's asking, Jashoda is asking Krishna, open your mouth, please. So Krishna opens his mouth. As Guru said, she said, you have eaten dirt, there is dirt in your mouth. Well, okay, you want to see dirt, you will see dirt. So she saw dirt, she saw planet Earths and multiverses and planet Earth inside the universe, and inside the planet Earth, she was seeing himself. She was seeing Krishna on Krishna's mouth, and inside that mouth, she was seeing another universe, another planet Earth, another Yashoda seeing the mouth of another Krishna, and so on. Like this vision was like a mamushka, what they call it. You open and there's something else, and there's something else, and there's something else. So for a minute, Yashoda was again overwhelmed. So she concluded, okay. Many theories were going on in her head, basically, but she concluded by saying, no, this must be Narayan doing some wonderful things through my little child, through my darling. That must be the case. That was her conclusion, her Siddhanta. And she was right at one point. I mean, her insight is above the, if you will, inferior, so-called inferior idea of only seeing Krishna as God. And it is in this 8th chapter before the Damodara-lila that we find a very nice verse that I will share with you, which it has been considered by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur the Paribhas Sutra of the whole Krishna-lila. The verse says, Traya Chopanishabdischa Sankhya Yogascha Sattvatai Upagiyamana Mahatmyam Harim Samanyatatmajam. So that personality who is considered throughout the Vedas and Upanishads and sacred texts, he's considered as the absolute God, worshipable Krishna. But in the case of Yashoda, she was considering him his little child. So Vishwanath Chakravarti said, this verse is the Paribhas Sutra for the whole Krishna Lila. This shloka is regulating, putting in context whatever you will find in the Krishna Lila in terms of Aishwarya and Madhurya. So yes, on one side we have Krishna as God. The scriptures say that, but Yashoda won't agree with the Upanishadic conclusion. She won't say Krishna as tu Bhagavan Swayam. We have to go through Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam in order, as we know, to forget that and see Krishna in terms of Brajabhav. So Yashoda is already there. She's a Nitya Siddha. So her opinion is Krishna is not God at all. At all. God is blessing him, and God has blessed us by giving us such a child. But the point is, Upanishads are saying Krishna is God, but the truth is the Upanishads are after Krishna, trying to enter Krishna Lila. That's described in the scriptures. So the scriptures say Krishna is God, and they're trying to attain Krishna. Yashoda say Krishna is not God, and she has Krishna on her lap. So whose opinion has more weight? Who is more closer to the truth, if you will? Whose opinion is more Siddhantic? So we are connecting us mainly ourselves with the opinion of the Brajavasis, which is the ultimate conclusion of the Bhagavad. Seeing Krishna in terms of Brajava. But also the Bhagavatam is giving us the preliminary tattva filter. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is God, and not only God, the ultimate face of God, the source, fountainhead of all the divinities, manifestations. And by properly understanding that, eventually we will start to approach him with particular feeling, getting closer and closer to the hearts of the Brajavas. So this Paribhas Sutra is just right before the Damodara-lila, putting in context what's already going on between Yashoda, Krishna, Vrindavan, Vatsalya, and what's about to happen in this Damodara-lila. So again, then in the Damodara-lila, we found this story. I won't enter into the detail of the whole Damodara-lila. You already know it better than me. But basically, what we find there is, as you know, Jashoda is in the morning. Briefly, I will describe the Lila. Jashoda is in the morning churning yogurt for Krishna. She has some special cows that are eating a special grass. So Krishna is having satisfaction with those products, and he doesn't need to go and steal in the neighbors' homes, even though the neighbors are complaining about that, but they are so much pleased with that at the same time. So she's in the morning churning the yogurt and composing spontaneously on the spot different kirtans about Krishna's daily activities. She's totally absorbed in that, reciting Nam Kirtan according to her Vatsalya sensibilities. And with her bundles moving while turning the yogurt, also the mortar where she was using, all of these were creating like a one-woman kirtan, like kartals were the bundles, the mridanga was like the mortar, and she was leading the kirtan and composing so many beautiful, spontaneous ragatmika, not raganuga, but ragatmika kirtan on the spot. So she was absorbed in this way while Braj was starting his day. He wasn't playing dawn. So not dawn in the morning, sorry. So, and Krishna woke up at that time. So he went to the room with Jashoda was churning the yogurt, and he stopped. He put his little hand, he was just a baby, his hand on the stick that she was using, like implying, I want you to give me your milk. I want to take breast milk. And so Yashoda became totally charmed by doing that. So she sat down, stopped what she was doing, started to give milk to Krishna. And of course, again, milk means affection. So Yashoda has unlimited capacity of giving affection. She's the mother of all, universal mother. So she was giving milk and giving currents and currents. And Krishna has unlimited capacity of taking affection. So we need the two elements in order to have rasa. No? Vishaya and Asraya, the perfect object of love, which has unlimited capacity to take in the proper sense and reciprocate, and the perfect love, which has the perfect disposition, surrender, and so on. So here we have this perfect match. So both Krishna and Jashoda were looking at each other in the eyes, totally hypnotized in trance, relishing rasa. So at this point, there was some milk on the oven, which was being boiled by Jashoda in order to make some sweets for Krishna. And everything in Vrindavan is conscious, as you know. So the milk was thinking, Krishna has unlimited capacity of drinking Jashoda's love, milk, and Jashoda has unlimited capacity of giving affection. So this will never end. That's the point. Something has to happen in order to interrupt this exchange. And why to interrupt this exchange? Because the milk was thinking, if I won't have the chance of offering myself in service for Krishna's pleasure, if they do not stop this exchange. So, and the milk was saying, they are totally hypnotized between each other. So my life is spoiled. I won't be able to offer myself in service. So Samacharya's comment poetically, the milk started to want to jump to the fire and commit suicide. So at that point, Jashoda realizes that the milk is overflowing. So she puts Krishna on one side and goes and tends to the milk and saves the milk, if you will. Because, again, important point here, she's rendering what's called Tadiya Seva, which means taking care of Krishna's paraphernalia for service. Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta will say that every ingredient of this creation is potential paraphernalia to offer for Krishna's pleasure. What to speak in Golok or in Gokul here. So she was taking care of Krishna's paraphernalia, Krishna's elements for service. Everything is there for Krishna's service. So she was not neglecting Krishna and taking care of the milk. She was taking care of Krishna, but taking care of the milk, because the milk is for Krishna. I mean, she has full sambandha gyan established. Everything Yashoda is saying in connection to Krishna's service. Everything converges in the pleasure of her object of love. So she was not neglecting Krishna. Actually, she was especially taking care of Krishna by taking care of those things that are to be used in his service. But again, Krishna externally, in order to make a point, he seemed, and in order to allow the rest of the Lila to unfold, he seemed not very happy with this. So he broke the yogurt pot that Jashoda was churning before. And he disappeared with some yogurt. So when Jashoda saved the milk, she went back to the place she was with Krishna, and she realized, the yogurt pot is broken and Krishna is not there. So everything fits perfectly. What's the conclusion of those 2 points? Yogurt pot is broken, Krishna is not there, and what's more, there are some, foot marks, yogurt foot marks, in one particular direction. So Yashoda get closer there with some stick in hand, and eventually she found Krishna was there sharing this yogurt with the monkeys. Because, again, as you know, in his previous descent as Ramachandra, Ramachandra went to the forest and he received so much help from the monkeys, Hanuman, Sugriva, and so many, in order to rescue Sita, kill Ravan, get back to Ayodhya. But he was like a renunciant in the forest. So he didn't have too much to give to the monkeys, just some roots from the forest. So now that he's in his original appearance as Krishna, he's saying, in my previous descent, I wasn't able to feed them so nicely to the monkeys. So now I will feed them very nicely because they helped me so much before. So he's given to the monkeys butter and yogurt day after day after day and so on. So the point is that, again, Yashoda appears, stick in hand. Krishna realizes that before seeing Yashoda, he was sharing that with the monkeys, but afraid, looking here and there, like behaving like someone who had done some mischief. And when he sees Yashoda, he starts to run, afraid, again, showing fear, a real fear. He was not making a show. We make that point in the Raga Varma Chandrika. And that's what's really overwhelming. In the context, again, of Prem Rasa, he has to reciprocate. Again, try to understand the psychology here of Krishna. Just show this approaching him with Vatsalya sensibilities. All this is being enacted in the context of Prem. This is not ordinary anger, fear, chastisement, nothing like that. This is totally, all of the things are sattvika bhavs, vyabhichari bhavs, different emotional, ecstatic expressions in the context of Lila. Even though it may take the form of something ordinary, it's only there to make so we may have some emotional bond with that. So Jashoda approaches Krishna with Vatsalya sensibility. She wants to chastise his son, because if she's not chastising him, he will be who knows what when he's older. So she wants to take care of his future. So Krishna immediately has to reciprocate with that spontaneously. So he will react in a corresponding way to Jashoda's Vatsalya approach, which will take him to cry, to be afraid, to run, to whatever. Even though it may seem ordinary, that's the perfect way of himself expressing his Bhakta Vatsalya, his love, his mercy towards each one of his devotees in the context of rasa, in the context of the particular approach. And again, you say, well, but Krishna's reaction is very particular. Okay, so the Brajavasi's love for him is very particular. And that's why he appears in that particular form. And that's very charming, for sure. So again, eventually, Krishna starts to run, as you know, and Jashoda starts to run after him all along Braj, outside the house, in the midst of the village. And that creates a whole event for the whole of Vrindavan, who start to focus. They are already absorbed in Krishna, but in this particular moment, they are especially absorbed there. So Jashoda starts to run slower because she's a little bit old, as you may know. Both Jashoda and Nanda, when Krishna was born, especially Nanda, he had the age for being Krishna's grandfather, actually, almost. Jashoda was a little bit younger, but still not that young. So she was not able to run too much. And all the flowers in her head, everything was like falling to the ground. So eventually, what's the point? She captured Krishna. God was captured again. So she had the stick in hand, and Krishna was crying, and his kajal, the eyeliner was falling with the tears on his face. Of course, Jashoda will never have chastised Krishna with the stick. It was just a symbol to educate his son. And eventually starts the time dynamics at that point. So Jashoda has some rope, so she starts to tie Krishna. And as you know, always there's 2 fingers too short. So she asked for some extra rope, and the gopis already there was smiling at the situation because the rope was never enough. It was never enough. Different acharyas say different things. These 2 fingers short represent karma and gyan. You will never get to Krishna, to tie Krishna through karma and gyan, but only bhakti, and a special type of bhakti. But all other acharyas have said this represents effort and mercy. So you can make all the effort you want, but mercy is required. Mercy is required for finally attaining that. So at the beginning, this is not happening. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also explains very nicely, as we spoke some classes ago. At this time, the Vibhuti Shakti and the Satya Sankalpa Shakti activates in Krishna. No? Vibhuti Shakti means like the majesty Shakti, which is showing he's unlimited. You want to tie me? You cannot tie me. I cannot be tied. I'm God, I'm the absolute. Of course, he was not saying that overtly, but that Vibhuti Shakti was making that happen. No? Always 2 fingers too short. And it's not that Krishna was expanding in size. He remained small, but robe was never enough. So that was the work of the Vibhuti Shakti. And the Satya Sankalpa Shakti is the Shakti which makes every desire of Krishna become true. So Vishwanath mentioned at that time Krishna wanted to go and play with his friend, feeling my duty is to play with my friends at this time, so I cannot be tied now. If I'm tied, I won't be able to play with my friends. So this Satya Sankalpa Shakti was not allowing Jashoda to tie him because he wanted something else. But eventually, as we know, Jashoda is so much absorbed again, making so much sacrifice, trying, obsessed in her Vatsalya, wanted to please Krishna, wanted to tie him. Why? As also commentators say, not because she said it is functional mother tying her son to the post, that will be in all the news, but she was thinking, oh, Krishna's crying, Krishna's escaping from me. Maybe he will be traumatized and he will want to run from home and will never come back. So what will be of us if that happens? And what will be of him? So in order to prevent Krishna's so-called escaping from home, she tied him for a moment. So these 2 fingers too short represent mainly this idea, effort and mercy. So Jashoda was making so much sacrifice that eventually Krishna's Kripa Shakti, the mercy-giving potency, override the other Shaktis, Vibhuti Shakti and Satya Sankalpa Shakti, and Krishna was finally tied. And of course, again, this is the converging point of all the other symptoms, God crying, fearful, God being tied. This is a very powerful metaphor about prem, because Sri Krishna Karshini, God allows himself to be tied only by the rope of love, prem Raj. So it's very important, this point, and that's his mercy actually. He's showing his mercy, but allowing himself to be tied by love. He himself in his humility will feel, I'm receiving mercy, I'm receiving prem from my devotees. So that's an important point. And for us as sadhakas, we are trying to practice, we should be aware of how to say, we are praying for mercy, but we should sometimes, how to say, we pray, Krishna, give me mercy, but sometimes we are expecting in our idea, Krishna giving mercy means that he should do something, such and such thing in my life. And maybe such and such thing, we should be doing that for our own capacity. Or vice versa. Sometimes we may try to do something from our own capacity, and that's only up to Krishna's mercy. So we should try to understand properly how to deal with these 2 principles of effort, sacrifice, and mercy. So, here we are having a glimpse. I'm just giving some introduction, so hopefully you have some time and some breath, extra breath to continue. But these are some of the implications of dealing with divine humanism, this such a special concept. Not only how to deal with such so-called imperfection in Lila, again, but going back home here, our personal situation, how to deal with our imperfection. Krishna's Nara-lila and our so-called Nara-lila, if you will. This is an important point that I would like to emphasize along this series, because for us as bhaktas, the path is an extension of the goal, if you will, or vice versa. You don't like to conceive it, but the point is, bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya. We engage in bhakti in order to engage in further bhakti, not to stop doing bhakti and doing something else eventually in the goal. So for us, what's the difference between our practice and the goal? It's a matter of intensity, emotional absorption, if you will. sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, prem bhakti, but bhakti is always there. So for us, the path, the practice is an extension of the goal. The goal is extending to us. So the point is, if our path, our present experience in practice is ornamented, if you will, with imperfection, or let's say better, if the goal is ornamented with imperfection, so-called imperfection, quote unquote, as we are analyzing with all these elements, if the goal possesses such attributes, then naturally the path, which is an extension of the goal, somehow or other will have to include those ingredients as well. Of course, there will be some difference, and that's what makes the path and the goal something different, but there are unity in that difference as well. So my point is, we should get acquainted and accustomed to deal with so-called imperfection in our present stage in such a way that when we are getting closer to our goal and these so-called imperfections appear, we are not rejecting them, but are properly including them. Narottam Das Thakur confirmed this point in one of his statements. He mentioned that the difference between sadhana and prem is the maturity of prem. No? Sadhana will be immature prem. For saying it somewhere or other, it's not that we already have prem immature, but it's somewhere expressing in words. So in prem, we will find mature imperfection, if you will, so-called imperfection. All these so-called flaws and limitations are expressing themselves in the most mature, charming, and perfect way. Perfect imperfection, however you may like to call it. So if we do not learn to include that somehow or other, to allow that to happen, even in our stage, we won't reach its ultimate expression, its most mature expression, where we will transcend the actual faults and we will replace them for divine, if you will, so-called flaws and faults. So all these things have to be accommodated in our project of trying to get closer to the aprakrita realm. Aprakrita means something that seems prakrita. Prakrita means imperfect, mundane. And so we have these three levels of realm: prakrita, adhokshaya, and aprakrita. Prakrita means mundane, overtly imperfect. Adhokshaya means absolute, transcendental, overtly perfect. And aprakrita means divine imperfect. It's beyond adhokshaya, beyond perfection, and beyond our imperfection, but it represents a synthesis of our imperfection, divine perfection, and it appears as divine imperfect. So we have imperfect, perfect, and divine imperfect, the highest synthesis. The latter represents the full circle, from mundane imperfection to divine perfection to divine imperfection. Seems to get close to our own present situation, but includes and transcends it, and so and what else. So again, aprakrita seems as the first one, as prakrita. That's why it's named like this, aprakrita. Seems prakrita, seems mundane, but it's supramundane. It's so transcendental. So it's so transcendental that it seems again similar to the most mundane. It's like when you make again full circle, it seems the same as the other one, but it's exactly the opposite and more. So it's important for us not to misunderstand this Braja-lila, this aprakrita lila of Braj. And in order to do so, I think on one side, one important thing to do is, as Vishwanath said, to understand the background of Aishvarya, Sarvajñata, majesty, omniscience that is there in the expression of the Madhurya, or what Vishwanath called the Mugdata, or the overwhelming of Krishna in Vrindavan, and all of his associates in the Braja-lila. We saw that in detail in the Raghavarma Chandrika. So that's one thing important to understand, to not misunderstand aprakrita lila in Braj. But also another thing important for us to not misunderstand our approach to this lila is to allow ourselves again in our present stage as sadhakas the type of imperfection that needs to be there, needs to express itself in order for us as sadhakas to learn the particular lessons that will take us ultimately to the Braja-lila. Somehow or other, to give place to the possibility of some type of imperfection. Of course, ideally, in the proper way. In us, because if we are not allowing that in us in any single way, most probably we won't be allowing that to happen in its perfect way in the absolute. That's an important point. This has not been addressed in detail by Vishwanath Chakrabarti, but we are trying to do it now here in his service, trying to honor his points. So before we can reach this perfect imperfection, divine imperfect, as we say, the Krishna Lila, first we have to go through our imperfect imperfection, if we will, our Srishti Lila case, if you will. And if we do that properly, that will take us to the supreme perfection of imperfection, if you will, which will hold the highest synthesis of perfection. So some words and some conclusion in this connection that we can reach to is that if I am not allowing properly my own imperfections in life, most probably I am not allowing Krishna Lila to happen at all, Braja Krishna to exist at all. I'm not allowing them to be what they are in ultimate terms, of course, again, making some difference between one thing and the other. So, some ideas I want to share with you. I think we can speak a little bit more. I don't know if you have some time or maybe you have some questions. If you have some questions, maybe we could address some of those questions. If not, I can continue sharing some ideas. I don't know how urged some of your inquiries may be there.
Yeah, I have Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, very nice. You explained very nice. So Maharaj, my one question is that when Yashoda tied with Krishna with a rope, why there is always two finger left? What is the significance behind it?
I have just explained that. You were not present, or you connected now, or you connected some minutes ago?
I think it's some connect.
Or maybe you disconnected
Yeah.
emotionally for a minute.
Yes.
But basically what I mentioned is that our acharyas share that these two fingers short have different meanings. One of them is that karma and gyan, each one of these fingers represents karma and gyan, and implying you cannot tie Krishna through karma and gyan. He won't be trapped, if you will. He won't be captured by fruitive action, selfish desire, or monistic knowledge. You won't be able to tie him as Yashoda did. But that will happen through bhakti, especially through prem bhakti and especially through the prem of Vrindavan. So that's one meaning. No? So the point that it was never, at the beginning, is this not happening? The symbol is, it won't happen if you are not approaching him with Krishna with the proper attitude. Again, as I mentioned also, there was these different Shaktis in Krishna interacting at that moment. They were not for a moment allowing that to happen. This Vibhuti Shakti and Satya Sankalpa Shakti, no? Which were wanting to make the point. Even though you try to tie Krishna, don't forget the Vibhuti Shakti is making the point. Don't forget, he's still the absolute. He seems middle-sized, he seems human-like, but still his body is unlimited. Even though he's not expanding, like, I don't know, when Arjuna asked Krishna, show me the Virat Rupa, and that form actually started to expand and grow, and hundreds of arms and legs and heads, and no beginning, no end. And Arjuna was overwhelmed, said, please return to your original form. But in this case, the interesting thing is that Krishna's form was not expanding, remained the same. But at the same time, it was never enough rope. So the point was, he's still the absolute, of course. He's unlimited, he's infinite. But he agrees, if you will, to be tied. Naturally, he's forced to do so by the strength of Jashoda's love. So eventually, by Krishna's witnessing the level of dedication of Jashoda to the cause of Krishna's pleasure, his son's pleasure, Krishna felt totally indebted and charmed and trapped eternally and it becomes visible in this symbol of the rope on he himself being tied by Jashoda's prem. Basically, that's the main point. Krishna in Vrindavan is a tied personality, but Jashoda, but every single Brajavasi, the prem there is so powerful that Krishna cannot be but tied, captive, basically. That will be basically the idea. And also, again, as I said, the two fingers too short represent kripa and sacrifice. No? So those two things, symbolically speaking, have to be there for making the full picture, generally. No? We are in the school of sadhana. We want to be sadhana siddhas. No? We don't want to be kripa siddhas. Of course, if Krishna wants to bestow kripa siddhi, that's another thing. But we cannot just be sitting on the bench and waiting for kripa siddhi, which is perfection through mercy, even though we may have not engaged in any sadhana. No, we have to make some daily endeavor, proper endeavor in sadhana, while, as Guru Maharaj will say, Guru Maharaj said once very nicely, you should deal with your sadhana as if everything will depend on your personal endeavor, while knowing in depth that mainly everything depends on Krishna's mercy. So your main effort will be in the direction of trying to obtain that mercy. That was what Guru said. Our main sacrifice and effort and practice is in the direction of locating ourselves in the disposition of being willing to receive more mercy, being aware of how much mercy we need. That requires effort. That requires tons of humility to really live your life really understanding how much mercy, how much needy we are, in the proper sense of the term, and intelligently taking shelter in the proper direction. So all the things are implied by these two fingers too short of rope. So those are lessons for us as sadhakas mainly. Jashoda doesn't need to learn that lesson. She's a siddha, nitya siddha. But for us as sadhakas, these two fingers too short, we're making many points. Limited form of Krishna, how to tie Krishna, how not to approach Krishna, how to combine properly effort and mercy, and so on. So when all those lessons were properly presented, Jashoda was able to tie Krishna, because her prem always ties Krishna. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions in his commentary that Krishna remains eternally indebted to Jashoda's prem. Not only to her, of course, to Jashoda's prems as well. So he accepts to be tied by her for eternity. In another word, he makes a point. This time of Krishna goes beyond the Damodara-lila, even though eventually the rope is not there. The rope is still there always, because we are speaking about the rope of prem. So Krishna is always tied by that rope, and the Brajavasis as well are always tied with that rope. It's fully reciprocal. So what else? Any other question? I think we will continue with questions today. Who is speaking? Mahaprabhu?
Mahaprabhu.
Yes.
Yes, and Tadas, I think he also want to ask a question.
I will wait.
Next we go to the next one. Make your question, Mahaprabhu.
Okay, thank you. Once I was talking with one devotee about this lila, and he mentioned to me that this is also the inception of Govardhan lila, because the milk that distracted Yashoda to put down little Krishna while she was feeding him was actually meant to do some puja for I forgot the name, the king of the heavens, Indra. So then Krishna became angry also at Indra because due to the Varnashama and all the dharmic things, they had to worship him. So Mother Yashoda was distracted from her affectionate attention to Krishna. So is this true?
There is also that connection with that background, if you will, connection with the lila. The Damodara-lila Samacharyas have done that connection, that they were preparing. Again, there's not unanimously everyone saying that, but there was some connection, and you find this dynamic in different lilas, in different scriptures. You have one story, but there is one story behind that story, and there is another story behind that story, and the cause. It seems that there's no end to the cause of the story. this happened because of this, but behind that something else happened, and something this happened, and something this happened. So it's a way of showing the Lila is an ending, and we can draw from different directions, and in all of them there is something nourishing the proper mood. So yeah, that's one of the possible ways of conceiving some background reason for this particular Lila. So who else had a question? Someone else? Tadas?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I thank you very much. Firstly, I liked very much how you described the interaction between Krishna and sadhakas, how the love of the sadhakas are carving the shape of Krishna, and also that part with imperfections of Krishna, how they are getting mature while the sadhaka is advancing in practice. So the question would be, if the same is happening with the imperfections of sadhaka. I mean, every one of us, we have some imperfections, but we're trying to get advanced. And does our imperfections, they disappear, or just the point of view from Krishna point of view is changing on these, imperfections, and they are becoming also mature and becoming, a bigger force, which is, doing affection on Krishna.
Yeah,
If you know what I mean.
I think I understand.
Yeah.
Here Aradhan is asking if anyone's sound just cut out. I don't know. In my case, I was hearing you perfectly. Everyone says it's okay, so it seems something with personal karma over there, Aradhana. So regarding Tada's question, well, we will speak in further detail in the next lectures about this. I will say something, of course, now, but I will speak in much more detail. Today was more like an introductory, if you will, lecture to the whole thing and presenting the Damodara-lila generally and some points here and there. In the remaining lectures, we will especially deal with detailed issues in our personal daily practice, struggle, and experiences as sadhakas. But I will say that in the same way that there may be some imperfection, sometimes example is given in this world. No? For example, a father may be with, or the mother will maybe there, and the son comes, the baby comes, 1 year old, 2 year old baby, and he just make a drawing for her mother. And the drawing, according to professional aesthetic considerations, is a disaster, basically. But the mother will see the drawing and tears will be flowing from her eyes. No, she's not seeing any imperfection at all, because she's perceiving the intention, the mood there. So my point with this is, if we as sadhakas are properly guided and have good intention, no matter how much imperfection remains there, because there may be remain, it's not just, okay, I want to be perfect, I have good guidance, I have good intention, okay, but it doesn't mean you are immediately in prem. But it will be just a matter of time. And according to Krishna's psychology and according to our well-wishers, they will feel in that same way. And that's why sometimes Guru Maharaj, he will say, some people judge others according to their past. No? That's not very generous. I'm judging you because of what you did 20 years ago. I'm not allowing you to change. Some other people are judging others according to their present. That's not too generous either. But the sages and Mahaprabhu and our well-wishers are considering us according to our future, according to what we want to become, according to our prospect. Even though we are not yet there, but they see you are sincere, you are properly well-guided, well-intentioned. It's just a matter of time. And what's a matter of time? Maybe even 1, 2, 3 lifetimes. That's nothing in eternity. That's nothing. From the perspective of an inhabitant of eternity, that's nothing. So my point is, they will see our so-called present imperfection yet, but they will feel like moved, like this mother being moved with the drawing of her child, because they are seeing the mercy of Krishna coming to our life, the life of that devotee. He's sincere, she's sincere. Even though externally there may be yet something that is not too mature and so on, but they know that's something in time, the process, bhakti itself will make everything perfect. So in that sense, even our so-called present day imperfections will be a cause of how to say, of charm for our well-wishers if we are properly, of course, if we are properly situated, we are not to abuse this, to take this as an excuse. But if we are properly endeavoring in our path, whatever remains so-called imperfect stuff there actually will become an ornament. No? So again, it's not so much about replacing and distracting everything, but trying to including, in this case, the descent of Bhakti Shakti, of Swarup Shakti in our lives, and even what was before some fault in our character, in our personality, that may become some extra charm. That may happen in great devotees. The great devotees may have some particular, I don't know, so-called fault in their character. Sometimes they may get, how do you say in English, grumpy? Grumpy, that's the word? Let me say.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like grumpy. Like sometimes you get a little bit angry and whatever. So my point is, I have met devotees who are pure devotees, real advanced devotees, and they have their grumpiness in their character, but in the context of their pure bhakti. So that was only adding to the charm of their own personality. It was like you were feeling that's part of the lila. No? As you read the lila, there are grumpiness here and there. So for those who are inhabiting there already, that will take that form. Of course, we cannot imitate, but that process will be happening gradually. So some ideas regarding what you were asking. So I hope that helps, but we will continue unfolding these ideas up from the next lectures. There's one question here in the chat coming from Omkar. So I will address that. And of course, if you have any other, we may continue later. He's asking, is it better to guide and encourage imperfect attempt instead of slapping the wrist and prevent its potential to develop and correct and perfect itself? I'm not sure if I understood the expression slapping the wrist, but I think I understand. I was just wanted to confirm what's wrist. Okay, it's like, right. Well, again, this is another question that deals with topics that we will talk in detail starting from the next lecture. So I'm sharing some trailer-like answers, but we will delve in that in detail starting from the next one. But in brief words, of course, that we should encourage imperfect attempt. Of course, we are not encouraging do that imperfectly. We are encouraging do that, even though it may be still imperfect. But do that trying to make it as perfect as possible. But again, what's perfect, what's imperfect, what's the parameters of perfection? It's not an external presentation. We know the famous story of Vidura's wife offering Krishna's banana peels. Externally, that was not perfect. That was a disaster. Now imagine you are presenting to the deity banana peels and you're throwing the bananas to the compost. That's not the way. But Duryodhana was presenting the perfect offering externally, but internally his disposition was totally imperfect. So Krishna chose the so-called imperfection of Vidura's wife, and he ate the banana peels one after the other. So, of course, we should encourage the attempt. We should encourage the endeavor, and we should encourage the devotees. And that's the whole intention of my doing this series with you now. We should encourage the devotees to allow imperfection in their life as part of the perfection project, if you will, as part of a practice of, we are in a lineage which integrates imperfection even in its ultimate form. That's my point. Now, Krishna-lila, of course, is supremely perfect, but it gives place to imperfection in such a way that that imperfection even becomes charming, and it's adding to the ornamentation of the Lila. So we shouldn't wait to be in the Krishna Lila to do that job. We have to start here, because if we do not start here doing that, we will never get there. That's actually the point. So of course, because if not, it's like, I don't know, if you are just repressing people, saying, no, do not do that because you will make a mistake. Do not do that because you will make a mistake. So how will you reach perfection? I mean, you will never reach perfection, strictly speaking, because there you can always become more perfect. That's the nature of love in our particular tradition. And the nature of love, it gives full satisfaction on one side, interestingly, and on the other side, it can always become more. It can always grow in its eternal becoming. So that creates some sort of transcendental dissatisfaction. So that sounds paradoxical, and it's paradoxical. And we should get accustomed to deal with paradoxes. I will speak about that next lecture. That's the important aspect of trying to become an intermediate devotee, who is able to deal with paradoxes, contradictions, controversies, and accommodate, integrate them, not just black and white thinking. And of course, this has to do with perfection and imperfection. So yes, we have a potential to reach very nice things, but on the way of learning how to do things, we have to make mistakes, of course. Imperfect attempt. I mean, if you are well-intentioned and well-guided, that's perfect. That's the perfection we are concerned with. And that's it. And we should be concerned with being perfect as we can, not obsession, neurosis. As perfect as we can, we should be well-intentioned and well-guided, and be open for that guidance and to learn, keep learning. That's the important thing, to learn from our experience. Because also you can make a mistake and not learning from that mistake. And you can make a mistake and you learn from the mistake, and you do something quote unquote perfect, and you are not learning anything from that. Maybe you are becoming proud. So which was better? Again, the perfect menu that Duryodhana offered to Krishna, he didn't get any insight from that, or the banana peel thrown by Vidura's wife. She drawn so much from that, and Krishna also. So yeah, I think it's important to encourage this realism and humanity, and to be really honest and humble, to allow myself to be wrong and to commit mistakes, to be an eternal student. Student forever means I still have to learn something, some new lesson. And that Bhaktivinoda Thakur will say in his own words, today's perfection is tomorrow's imperfection. So try to swallow that one. That's the real dynamics of a progressive practitioner. Today's perfection is tomorrow's imperfection. Today I have to reach a certain level of attainment for today, for justifying my existence in today's. But tomorrow, that's not enough yet. I need to attain a little bit more. The famous example is when Guru Maharaj shares with the devotees, say to Prabhupada, today I distributed 100 Bhagavad Gitas. And Prabhupada say, great, tomorrow 200. So you may feel, oh, he's not appreciating my 100 Gitas. No, because he's appreciating that, and he's seeing your potential, he's putting the bar a little higher for you to have a new challenge tomorrow and keep growing. Because that's the dynamics of life. You have to keep growing, keep learning. But keep learning means today's perfection becomes tomorrow's imperfection. If you want to use those terms, if those terms, you don't like the term perfection, imperfection, you can choose some other, no problem. But try to get the gist of my point, which is dynamism and being progressive and keeping learning and growing. So yes, as guidance, as parents, whatever is your role, we should, and for us with ourselves, we should allow ourselves to be mistaken, encourage even the necessity of dealing with imperfection. That makes us human in many senses. Sometimes if not, we become just a perfection machine, and a tapasya machine. We can become perfect in our even spiritual practice, or as Thomas Merton may have said, we may like to achieve perfection only as a way of satisfying our ego, to achieve saintliness as a way of just feeling myself I'm perfect, not like the other ones. But real holiness, real saintliness has nothing to do with feeling yourself, I'm better than others, I'm perfect. But actually you are getting closer to the infinite. So Srila Sri Maharaj will say, do you know what it implies to get closer to the infinite? You will realize there's no limit to making progress. Are you ready to pay that price, to get close to a reality where the constant realization at every step is there's no limit to progress? So there will be no place for feeling yourself perfect, proud, full of yourself. So we need to train, to prepare ourselves for entering to that land. We are getting closer and closer there. So all the things had to be properly in place. And our humanity as transcendentalists has to be properly in place. Because again, our transcendental project also includes a type of humanity, divine humanism. The Damodara-lila of Krishna in Vrindavan is not only fully transcendental, it's fully human at the same time. So we need to integrate all these apparently contradictory ideas. So we will try to, and this is not only sitting like this and speaking about that and hearing that, that's also important, but also it's a matter of daily practice and daily contemplation and prayer and being honest with ourselves for days and weeks and years and decades and whatnot. So that was it meant to be a sadhaka, basically, with integrity in our practice. So yeah, allow yourself in brief words. Better to guide and encourage imperfect attempt to trying to not allow that in the name of perfection, and everyone will remain just in kindergarten, basically. So thank you for the question. So anything else before finishing today? Any other question? Okay, so it seems we have no more questions today, so I think it's okay. We have already spoken for quite a while, so I think we can stop here and we will continue. Anyhow, this was like kind of a preliminary introductory lecture for what we want to share in our remaining lectures. And actually, we have 2 more remaining lectures, because one point that I want to mention, sorry for saying that, I just realized some days ago, Arjuna Siddhi also made me realize that next Monday we won't have a lecture. Why? Because next Monday is Srila Siddhar Maharaj's appearance day, and Guru Maharaj will be given lecture at this time. So we will hear him, we will be there. So we will meet each other for continuing with this one in 2 weeks. So this next Monday, no, another one, which will be, I think, 16, November 16, and then November 23, I think. So you have 2 weeks for trying to ruminate and process all what we have spoken today. We'll be sharing the audio also for the ones who would like to hear it again. So thank you very much to all of you for your time. Your presence, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Sri Damodara-lila ki jai, Sri Kartik Brat ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda ki
Thank you.
Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.